Your Excellency President Mahmoud Abbas, President of the Palestinian Authority, Mr. Vuk Jeremic, President of the General Assembly, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the United Nations, Ambassador Hardip Singh Puri, President of the UN Security Council, Ambassador Palita Kahona, Chair of the Special Committee to investigate Israeli practices in the occupied territories, Mr. Jeffrey Feltman, Under-Secretary General for Political Affairs. Ladies and gentlemen, as we officially open this solemn meeting, the new tragedy which has struck in vain to establish a definitive peace, the promises to bring justice to all the peoples of great hopes, the peace initiatives evaporated. The committee will continue to fulfill the mission entrusted and will allow Israel and Palestine to live side by side in peace and security. I thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I now have the honor of giving the floor to the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon. Sir, you have the floor.
Of realizing the just and lasting peace for which generations of Palestinians and Israelis have longed. A peace that ends the occupation that started in 1967 and ensures that an independent, viable and sovereign state of Palestine lives side by side with a secure state of Israel. I call on Israel and Palestine.
And so that one day soon, the state of Israel can live in peace and security, and that the state of Palestine.
The Security Council remains committed to a comprehensive, just and lasting peace in the Middle East, based on the vision of a region where two democratic states, Israel and Palestine, live side by side in peace within secure and recognized borders, and result in the emergent Palestinian state living side by side in peace and security with Israel and its neighbors.
To our people, to allow them to live in freedom and dignity in their homeland and to act in the interest of peace and security in our region. A viable and contiguous state of Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital, living side by side with Israel in peace and security on the basis of the pre-67.
The international community must not lose sight of the overarching goal of the two states living side by side in peace and security. Palestinians and Israelis could enjoy security and peace as neighbors.
Refugees, security and water. This lost and obstructed the resumption of the peace process. Israel has continued
a step closer to achieving a sustainable solution on the basis of two states living side by side in peace and security. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
While reaffirming support to the two-state solution as the only viable option for peaceful coexistence between the state of Palestine,
and to create the conditions for a fair, equitable and lasting peace in the region. At the same time, we've changed that will firmly put the region on the path towards peace, encompassing all.
The United Nations Security Council, the General Assembly, and its
attaining peace, and the responsibility of nations was establishment, that is to realize international peace and security and maintain them.
The settlements are not simply an obstacle to peace, they are illegal.
An assembly would now take a decision on draft resolution A.
The voting has been completed. Please lock the machine.
The result of the voting is as follows. In favor,
independent Palestine living side by side in peace and security with a Jewish and Democrat. We urge those who share our hopes for peace between a sovereign Palestine and a secure Israel to join. Thank you, Mr. President.
Palestine living side by side in peace and in security within secure and internationally recognized borders.
Both sides have legitimate rights and shared responsibilities and must be prepared to make compromises to achieve the larger good. of a lasting peace.
Change the situation on the ground and deserve, and to give the Israeli people the security and peace that they are entitled to.
Whether the step undertaken today is helpful for the peace process at this point in time. Welcomes the fact that the resolution adopted today calls for a two-state solution and hence fully recognizes the right of Israel to exist in peace. I repeat, Israel's legitimate security concerns have to be addressed in a credible manner. Otherwise, the peace process will remain stalled.
A solution with two states, Israel and Palestine, living side by side in peace and security.
And I'll give the floor
by this resolution, namely a two-state solution, two states living side by side in peace and security, with a future
state living in peace and security alongside Israel.
Diplomatic relations with Israel. Think about statehood for Palestine and security and peace for both Israel and Palestine.
Honduras supports with particular conviction a solution between both states, Israel and Palestine, peace in the Middle East, as an unescapable yearning of the people of this region is fully shared by the Honduras and must find the formulas that will take on board the concerns of security and other issues of both states.
We reaffirm our commitment to a two-state solution with the state of Israel and an independent, democratic, contiguous and viable state of Palestine living side by side in peace and security, a commitment which can be achieved on the basis of two-state solution with the state of Israel and the sovereign, democratic, contiguous and viable state of Palestine, both in living in agreed borders and enjoying peace and security.
An independent and viable Palestinian state coexisting in peace and security with the state of Israel.
With this aim, we support the establishment of a sovereign, viable and contiguous state of Palestine, living side by side in peace and security with Israel, to be found its implementation.
Full support of the positions expressed in the declaration of the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Catherine Ashton.
Resulting in two states, the state of Israel and the state of Palestine, living side by side in peace and security and mutual
democratic, contiguous and viable state of Palestine, living side by side in peace and security.
That allows a secure Israel to live alongside an independent future Palestinian state. Australia has concerns that this resolution, as does our support for Israel's legitimacy and right to security, in looking beyond today's vote,
will not bring about a secure Israel living peacefully alongside a viable, contiguous Palestinian state.
Sovereign, democratic, contiguous and viable Palestinian state living side by side with the state of Israel in peace within secure and recognized borders. Only a viable state of Palestine living side by side in peace and security within secure and recognized borders with the state of Israel
would qualify for membership in the United Nations. The most practical and viable outcome is a negotiated agreement, and the Palestinians aimed at establishing two viable states living side by side as provided for by the 1993 Oslo Accord. Thank you, Madam President.
On the basis of a two-state Palestine will be living side by side in peace and security. Such an agreement would bring a much needed
two-state solution under which would coexist side by side in peace and security. In light of this, Japan
side by side with safe and internationally recognized borders for the Palestinian people. In the framework of that well-known formula of two states living in peace side by side behind secure borders. The reason for our abstention, we believe that this formula is the only path to ensure peace, security, and stability not only between Israel and its immediate neighbors, but also for the Middle East has remained stagnant, and there are greater risks for the viability of a two-state solution, an Israeli and Palestinian state who coexist in peace and security, as independent and democratic states who coexist in peace within safe and internationally recognized borders,
including those of Palestinians for statehood and those of Israelis for security. Both are crucial elements for lasting peace, stability, and prosperity in the wider region. Ending the conflict is of paramount importance through a comprehensive peace agreement based on negotiation and agreements between the parties to establish a Palestinian state living in peace and security with Israel. I thank you, Madam.
Can only be brought about through a peaceful negotiated settlement for a two-state solution. Jamaica has sought historically to maintain a balance on this issue, which of course includes Israel's right to exist within secure borders. Jamaica fully respects and abides by the
resolution was implemented, and now it is important that it's side by side in peace and security with Israel, an independent and viable Palestinian state exists.
We continue to strongly support the two-state solution, where it remains our hope that both the peoples of Israel and Palestine will one day soon live side by side within properly secured borders under a durable, just, and long-lasting peace. It is from this perspective that Papua New Guinea is of the Middle East peace process. My delegation would like to reiterate its support for the two-state solution. What is most needed now is to provide new momentum to the peace process. In this regard,
the one promoted by the courts in Palestine, living side by side in peace and security within secure and internationally recognized borders. Thank you.
Also upholds the right of all states in the region to live in peace within secure and internationally recognized borders. It's about the realization of this two-state solution of an independent, sovereign, democratic, viable, and contiguous state of Palestine, living side by side with Israel in peace and security on the basis of the pre-1967 borders.
Versus the Palestinian state living side by side and at peace with the state of Israel, within secured borders on the basis of the pre-1967 borders. Versus also believes in a two-state solution where the state of Israel and Palestine can live alongside each other in peace within secured borders. It is unfortunate that the
international commitment to a peace process and to ensure peace and security for the peoples of the region.
Honored to address the General Assembly today on behalf of the non-aligned movement on agenda item 37, question of Palestine.
And relevant UN resolutions and pose a serious threat to international peace and security as well as to regional stability.
I think that
the end of this conflict. Only a political solution to this conflict can bring lasting security, peace and prosperity to Palestinians and Israelis. A comprehensive, contiguous and viable state of Palestine, those living in agreed borders and enjoying peace and security. The European Union has repeatedly expressed its support and wish for Palestine to become a full member.
Their inalienable rights and to live in peace and security. None of these legitimates is step closer to achieving a sustainable solution on the basis of two states living side by side in peace and security. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Independent statehood is the legitimate right of the Palestinian people. It is the basis and prerequisite for the realization of the two-state solution with the two countries living peacefully side by side. China supports the establishment of an independent state of Palestine with full sovereignty, with East Jerusalem as its capital on the basis of the 1967 border. China is one of the appropriately resolved can lasting peace and stability in the Middle East be realized, establish an independent state of Palestine